You know, they're selling y'all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Hey, pussy, are you still there?
I back. Trust me, I back.
But I'm not impressed by your performance.
Eles deu nothing. Eles deu nothing. Shut your fucking mouth, eles deu nothing. Eles deu fucking nothing. Not one of yous deu nothing.
I'll tell you what, bro. You know, I was out there. I was fighting all the hitters, bro. You ain't fought no hitters.
Come on, guys. Normal.
I'm not saying I would fight you. I would kill you.
John, do you think I'm just gonna sit there and let you kill me, John? I mean, really?
No, don't be scared, homie.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody. The double champ does what the fuck he wants.
I'm gonna beat you into the living death. I mean, maybe that's your job, but where I come from, you know, people like that get slapped.
That's fucking illegal.
Nate Diaz, you just shook up the world. How's that feel?
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Yeah, this is a simulated death match. And you haven't simulated anybody's death yet.
I said it last year. We're not here just to take part. We're here to take over.
What is the game plan going in against him?
The game plan is you go in there, hit him with some good shit, don't get hit, and come home with a pocket full of cash.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Everybody's on steroids. The whole UFC, everybody.
I'm gonna go home tonight. I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
Do you want to be a fighter? That is my question.
Any of you radio personalities think you want smoke? Call me Mr. Chimney. I want smoke.
Yes. What is up, MCR family? Another daily edition of the show live on YouTube, podcast from iTunes, Spotify, radio, etc. I am Matt, the Hipster Hunter. You can find me Matt Hunter, MCR, all platforms on social media. And we're going to be talking all things MMA today, breaking down UFC 244, Jorge Masvidal versus Nate Diaz, the baddest motherfucker title on the line. And whether or not that means anything is maybe a discussion we're going to have later on. Plus, breaking down a little bit of obviously what happened last week in UFC Singapore. Ben Askren losing to Damian Maia. And is Ben Askren overrated? And I'm probably going to answer yes. And we're going to debate that and discuss that. And I know that's going to be a contentious topic. Not maybe for us, but just for out there in the MMA community. Plus, we're going to talk about the issues with Paulo Borchina Costa being injured, Israel Adesanya versus Yo Romero being lined up, maybe. Jared Cannonier out there as well. Conor McGregor lined up for a fight, even though he has a allegation of rape out there. So that's just a weird situation. But a lot to get to in the MMA world and to debate. And, of course, I'm joined, as usual on these MMA shows, by the notorious, the lovely, what's the best sort of adjective for you, Ant?
I mean, this completely doesn't apply to me, but I just thought of the word effervescent.
I'm not using that word for you for sure. I'm joined by Anthony Walker from Sharedor.com and MMA On Point. Anthony, how are you, man?
Pretty good, man. It seems like it's been a while since we did a show together.
Yeah, I wonder why.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Just things have changed since we last were seen on screen with one another. But
topic for another time, maybe.
Yeah, I'm glad to talk to you again.
Of course, man. I'm really glad. You know, I feel like I've been dissed a little bit by not being invited back on Unleashed. You know, I'm just saying, Walkout Network.
It's only been a couple weeks, man. We can't have you on every week.
That is true. And last episode with Patrick, OJ, and who else was on?
Yeah, Jason Hartley.
And Jason Hartley. That was a great episode. You guys did fantastic. And shout out to Jay Petrie, of course, because Jay.
Jay's the man.
Jay is the homie of all homies. But digressing from that, let's get to UFC 244, Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal. I should say Masvidal versus Diaz, as Masvidal is sort of the A side in this fight in a way nowadays. I don't know, but at least he gets the A side headliner in terms of the title of the fight. But the fight this weekend should be a rather big one. I think, obviously, we have Canelo Kovalev competing on the same night. I'm curious as to what that dent will be in either one. I think it will be a dent, at least in either both or one of them for sure, on that night. There's no way those two can both reign supreme on the same night. One of those events has to be the bigger event. There can only be one. But digressing from that, Masvidal-Diaz, it's an interesting fight from just an X's and O's perspective because Diaz is a guy that he seems like a prototype to what Jorge Masvidal is now, right? Even though both guys are contemporaries of each other. You know, it's not like Masvidal is a guy that's younger, that's come up on the scene at a later stage than Nate Diaz. No, they're rather the contemporaries. They came up around the same time in terms of pro careers and pro debuts. Even have relatively similar, I would say, fight careers in some aspect. You know, long careers with some losses, losing streaks as well, ups and downs, and then all of a sudden just finding that star power and that matchup to really drive them to the next level. One just happened before the other. But Masvidal seems, from a technical perspective, from an X and O's perspective, seems to have evolved his game through time, through the last few years, and seems to have taken things that him and Diaz both did quite well, let's say, 5-10 years ago. But now, let's say, Masvidal does better than Diaz in almost every single category, meaning striking, boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling. You can argue that Masvidal is better than Diaz in almost every single category nowadays. And the evolution of Masvidal has just been a really shocking thing in of itself. But Anthony, your thoughts on the fight, man? It's coming up, Bass Motherfucker title on the line. Sort of your thoughts on Masvidal Diaz.
Well, actually, just as you're about to introduce me and everything, I'm about to fight this sneeze off, and let me get this under control. All right, it's under control now. I got it.
You know how, like, every time you say, "Oh, I have to sneeze," you don't have to sneeze. You instantly don't have to.
I just had to stall for a second, but we're good to go now. So, my initial thoughts on this fight is, from an X's and O's standpoint, this is definitely one of the more fascinating matchups that you can piece together. And one thing that makes it really crazy is that I agree with you about Masvidal being the better fighter on paper. I do believe that Masvidal is better in most categories over Diaz. And I would say maybe just pure jiu-jitsu, Diaz might be the winner. But even then, we're talking about Masvidal coming just a hair away from defeating Damian Maia.
Arguably beating him.
Yeah, and that was a fight that was largely contested on the ground. So it kind of washes that argument. But Diaz is constantly faced with people who are better than him on paper.
Absolutely.
Like even Anthony Pettis.
Or Don Cerrone, or, classical matches.
Conor McGregor even in their first fight. Like there are plenty of people that Diaz has fought and beaten. I even think back to the Michael Johnson fight. People that should beat Nate Diaz but don't for a variety of reasons. So I especially think that this fight is even more difficult to try to handicap when you consider that this BMF title is above it, because this is the sort of thing that can affect the course of the fight. This can affect the way both men approach the fight. Now, especially for Jorge Masvidal.
When you say that, you mean like from a subconscious, like they are out there thinking that this is for the Bass Motherfucker, literally for that title.
No, not literally, not for a belt that has any real meaning. But the reason why this was created is because both of these guys admired one another's fight style, and they liked their aggression. They got the street personas and all that.
Absolutely,
they enjoyed that. So when you have it built off this, while you're simultaneously like Nate was just today telling the media how he had no interest in fighting Khabib. He told Brett Okamoto he had no interest in fighting Kamaru Usman a couple months back and stuff. So when you have these guys that are simultaneously kind of shunning the actual belt based on the fact that the top of the division right now is primarily wrestlers, and that isn't the most fan-friendly style, it could put subconsciously in their heads to say, okay, we have to go in there and trade, or we have to just fight in this reckless style. Now, for Masvidal, that can potentially negate a lot of the things that he's better at Nate at. That could affect, like, if you get into just a pure gunfight with Nate Diaz, even if you hit harder like Masvidal does, you're dealing with a guy who lives for the gunfight, who overwhelms you with volume and drowns you in that gunfight. So it's kind of like how is this BMF title going to affect the actual action in the cage? And that's probably the most fascinating part of it all to me.
Since we talked about it, obviously, I think we're both in agreement here that Masvidal, from an X and O's perspective, on paper, is better than Diaz. Even like a pure boxing sense, I would say Masvidal is a better boxer than Nate Diaz, which might be blasphemy for Nate Diaz fans, but I think that's just the God honest truth. When you look at whose technique is better, whose punching technique is purely better, who throws better combinations, who has more variety of combinations.
Who doesn't get hit as often?
It's clearly Masvidal. You
Right.
add then maybe even the kickboxing aspect to the game, or just pure Muay Thai. I would say Masvidal has far and away better kicking game than Nate Diaz, and that's without question, I would say. The wrestling game, I would say Masvidal is better than Nate Diaz, and that's clear as day. Maybe, like you said, in the pure jiu-jitsu sense, Nate Diaz has the advantage there, but I would say that's largely negated because Masvidal is clearly one of the most underrated grapplers in MMA, without question, in my opinion. How does Nate Diaz overcome that? Because, like you said, he does find a way in a lot of these matchups, even like the Anthony Pettis one, a fight that I picked Pettis to win. I remember me and you being credentialed for that one, and we were even debating that one. I think you picked Diaz hesitantly, and I picked Pettis hesitantly, and we both sort of said, yeah, along the same lines here, that Pettis on paper is better, but Diaz just finds a way sometimes with these matchups, especially strikers, when you can fight just strikers at times. Diaz, for some reason, is far more effective in what he wants to do. And maybe he does get hit a lot. Maybe he is a guy that is sloppy with his technique, especially in the Pettis fight, off balance at times when he sort of throws in with combination. But what he wants to achieve, the end strategic goal, he ends up achieving most of the time. And Masvidal, a guy that, has a reputation of losing rounds, a guy that routinely has a reputation of losing that strategic goal. He may get lost in the tactical battle and then lose the strategic battle because, again, he's, for some reason, has had issues in the past with achieving strategic goals, being efficient in his game. Diaz is the antithesis of that. He is quite efficient at just doing his thing. Whether or not he actually makes a different game plan for each fighter is different. That's not what I'm talking about here. What he wants to do and set out in every fight, he largely achieves when he fights guys that are strikers, guys that want to end up trading with them. And like you said, maybe Masvidal sort of inclines with that and wants to trade with Diaz. And then Diaz is the type of guy, okay, I'm going to win here because I always end up winning my strategic goal. And you won't because you usually end up not winning your strategic goal at the end of the day. I'm really hesitant to make a pick here, to be honest. I think obviously Diaz on paper is the clear underdog, or at least he should be. But this is the type of matchup that he should win. Like, this is another Don Cerrone matchup where on paper that guy's better, but he's not going to win the fight 9 times out of 10.
Yeah. I think another factor to consider here, which is I'm very hesitantly picking Diaz again for this fight. And I'm really thinking about the trajectory of Jorge Masvidal's career. How many decisions has this guy lost? How many times has he probably should have gotten his hand raised that he didn't? Or how many times did he almost do just enough to win a decision, but he didn't? And still putting on great performances. I think back to Gilbert Melendez in Strikeforce when he fought for the lightweight title. You can even think to what's a more recent one, the Ben Henderson fight. Fights where he did very well in.
I Quinta fight.
I mean, that was just blatant robbery. Like that was just nuts. So that you can blame that one totally on the judges. But Masvidal has had a bad habit of kind of getting into a comfortable rhythm when he thinks he's winning, but his criteria for winning is almost rooted in his street fighting days, where it's like, okay, well, his face is more busted up than mine, so I'm definitely winning. Or, I rocked him at this point in time, and he may have out wrestled me, but hey, I still won. Like it has like this street fight vibe to it that just doesn't flow right with the judges. Now, even if Nate is the guy to have the street fight mentality as well, his style, it leads to more favorable looks from the judges.
Yes.
The volume, the constant moving forward, the tendency to make people want to do things they don't want to do. When you have a Conor McGregor shooting for a single leg takedown on you, it probably means you did something right on the feet.
Mm-hmm.
And his tendency to overwhelm and break people at a certain point. That looks pretty good to the judges, as opposed to Jorge's kind of like wait and see approach.
I agree, and I'll be honest. I want to pick Diaz. You know,
you're definitely a Diaz guy.
Oh, I have way more Diaz sound bites than any other MMA fighter or group ever.
Of course, like the whole intro is Diaz.
Like, I'm born and raised in California, so of course the Diaz brothers are the most famous California fighters of my lifetime. Even include boxers as well. Like, they're the most famous without a doubt. Except for maybe like Oscar, but I don't count Oscar in my lifetime. He's like another generation, in my opinion. But I'll be on. I make the same pick I did with the old Pettis pick. On paper, this guy's better, so I have to lean that way usually. I'm gonna lean more Masvidal in a split decision, and I do think that there's a possibility of a TKO win for him late as well. I think Nate can get hurt. I think Nate can get finished as well. I think Masvidal in his welterweight run has been finishing guys quite violently and quite athletically, and Nate Diaz isn't the most athletic guy, so maybe we see Masvidal land a really nice counter, hurt Diaz, and follow up. But I do think Masvidal is going to pull away with a very narrow win here in a really fun action fight, where I do think Diaz is going to have a lot of success. And I'll be honest, I think he's going to have a lot of that success in the championship rounds. I can see Masvidal win the first 3 rounds, and then Diaz take over in the 4th and 5th round and winning those clearly, even hurting Masvidal late. I could see a real back-and-forth fight here, but I do see Masvidal getting the better of the exchanges, getting the better of both the striking exchanges and the grappling exchanges. I just think he's better adept at modern fighting than Nate Diaz is. And I think in a weird way, the Anthony Pettis fight was maybe a red herring of what we have with Nate Diaz right now, if you get my drift. Anthony Pettis, well, yes, he was technically a better striker than Diaz, but stylistically, he was totally wrong for that fight. You could tell that Diaz was going to steamroll him, especially in hindsight. The more I look back on it, the more I realize how bad of a pick that was. But if we look at, let's say, Masvidal's run, he doesn't really get steamrolled in that way. He gets maybe outfought. He gets out. Somebody has sort of they outmaneuver him via tactics. They don't really beat him up.
You think about like the Wonder Boy fight or something like that.
Or even like the Darren Till fight, when Darren Till was having success with Masvidal. It was more of him tactically having the advantage, not really beating him up. And then Masvidal figured out and adjusted sort of the entrances and the feints of Darren Till, landed the counter, and then boom, it was over. Right? I could see Diaz, a guy that is sloppy, a guy that is predictable, let's be honest, coming in constantly with the same entrances and feints, and eventually Masvidal figure it out and just get the better of it. Or, like I said, Masvidal is also just the better boxer. And if he just sticks to the jab, doubles with the jab, triples with the jab, and tries to outbox Diaz, he can have a lot of success. Like a la, in a way, like Aldo Frankie Yeager in the first fight. Was that UFC 200? Or was that the second fight? Where like Aldo kind of just stood in the center and just countered a lot of the aggression of Frankie. A lot of those like bursts of energy from Frankie Yeager.
Just jab him, stay out.
Jabbed him, and then every time like Frankie would get close, land a check hook, and then maneuver out quickly. I could see Masvidal sort of replicating that game plan, adding a bunch of leg kicks as well. Even though Diaz is good at checking leg kicks, I expect Masvidal to get around that, start throwing the body a lot as well with his kicks.
Yeah, you think about like Josh Thompson had a lot of success on Diaz by mixing up the levels of the kicks. So, yeah, I could see him trying to replicate something like that. I think it's very important for Masvidal too to stay off the fence, to stay outside of that. If he keeps this in the middle, then this will be more to his favor, because if you're in the middle of the cage with Nate, there's no grappling exchanges that he's going to initiate. He only will go for some sort of takedown or sort of clinch position normally if you're against the fence.
Yes. He's not a guy that can initiate grappling exchanges in open space. He just can't. Like, love Nate Diaz, That's
he
not
just
him.
doesn't have like the explosive speed and stuff to do that typically. And he's not the one who's going to shoot a power double or anything like that.
Now, he is deceptively great at cornering you along the fence. So, like, to that point, like, don't be surprised if Masvidal just all of a sudden winds up behind the double black line, back up against the fence, and then Diaz either unloads with a combination, then clinches up, you know, and then sort of initiates his game and really gets going, a la the Anthony Pettis fight. And it's a great example of that, where you can tell Nate Diaz was really uncomfortable in that open space with Anthony Pettis. So what do? Kind of just check the leg kick. That'd be a main focus of him. Slap away any shots, and then just keep pressuring with just forward pressure.
He forced him to box
Yeah.
By checking the leg kicks. I think Pettis, didn't he like break his foot or
Yes, he did.
something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he forced him to box, and then and that's, but he can't quite force Masvidal to box and expect it to be as easy of a night. But it's like this. It's just the way these two intertwine. As we talk about it more, it's like all these layers are being peeled back, and this is a puzzle that I can't wait to see get solved. I'm just hoping that the presence of this title that is based on stand and bang and making the fans go crazy and stuff, I hope that doesn't interfere with the action, especially for Masvidal, because his best recipe for success is not playing along with that at all. His best recipe for success is something more strategic and a streamlined game plan.
Even though that's rarely been Masvidal's style. You know, he does get into like modes of comfort, but don't mistake that for being having a sense of like my game plan is to control the action. That's a very different thing for a fighter to just to find a comfort zone and to stick in that rut in fights, which Masvidal does constantly, especially back in the lightweight run of his in the UFC. And a fighter that is valuing control over everything else, a la Jose Aldo, right? It's a guy that, especially in the later half of his career, valued control more than a lot of other things, and that would win him rounds. Masvidal is not that guy, in my opinion. I think he just gets in ruts of action or inaction, so to speak, and that hurts him at times. But I would say largely in his welterweight run, that has not affected him as much. Moving on, though, I think this fight's one of those we can talk about for hours. It's just a fun fight, and I'm excited to see it. But quickly, Ant, because you're going to be here at my house Saturday night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Canelo Kovalev, Jorge Masvidal, Nate Diaz, both fights are on at the same time. What are we focusing on?
I mean, you know, I'm an MMA guy. I'm
Trash.
the BMF title. It means more to me than that.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't mean anything. Well, I mean, this fight means more to me. Like the action of it seems more fascinating. Although Canelo and Kovalev is a fascinating fight also. I just think it's a dumb idea for these two main events to be going on at the same time.
It really sucks.
I don't. I mean, somebody needs to sit Oscar down and tell him it's time to get this work. Like,
Oscar's barely been there, man. Check out video we have on the.
Somebody needs to tell Oscar's dope man that you need to relax, bro. You need to go ahead and let this main event happen after the UFC is over, because it's that level of card, and you don't want to take away from a fight of that magnitude of your own.
Did you see that Canelo? We have video on this on the channel. Go check it out. Did you see that Canelo came out and said that Oscar has no loyalty in him?
I saw that.
That's so good.
What a complete disaster! Like,
so good. I saw that and I laughed my ass off.
Yeah, that's nuts. Yeah, I mean, my preference would be the main event of 244, but it's your house, so you know, whatever. I'm good. I'll be happy with either fight.
No, don't wait. Both fights will be on, but it's which one gets the big TV?
Oh, okay.
Which one gets the smaller TV, which is still like a 32-inch, but still.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, your setup is pretty dope, so I'll be fine.
Yeah, you will, but I know you're gonna bitch anyways when I pick Canelo Kovalev. Digressing though, let's get to the co-main event: Kelvin Gastelum versus Darren Till, which is finally on. Darren Till is in town.
I just got in town like 3-4 hours ago, something like that.
Thank God. because when this first like came on like the radar, so to speak, when this first became a news story, maybe on Wednesday, I want to say, maybe Tuesday, I instantly thought, oh, weight cut. But I was like, okay, no, he's moving up to middleweight. Hopefully speaking, a giant weight cut is not in the plans for Darren Till. If this was a 170 fight, if I'm Darren Till, I might be asking to postpone the fight, to be honest, because getting in town on 24 hours notice before you weigh in is
trying to cut weight on the plane, and like that's
insane. But luckily, he's moving up to middleweight for this fight, so thinking the extra 15 pounds is going to give him the leeway where this isn't an issue. But I'm curious if there's any media in town, and I know Darren Till I know he's supposed to do something for media day today, but whatever it is, ask him about the weight cut, please.
Till didn't make media day. From what I heard, Till is supposed to have some sort of scrum at some point, either between the official and ceremonial weigh-ins or right after the ceremonials. It's something to that effect, that they'll do some sort of makeshift media day for him, I guess. But I do know, spoke with Oscar from Mac Life, who's obviously there
Oscar
right now.
Willis.
He had a he said he had a one-on-one scheduled with Till that obviously got canceled with all this. But my first thought, excuse me, when
quickly before you jump to that, since we're mentioning the homies, shout out to Submission Radio guys.
Oh yeah, Submission Radio out there killing it right now. They're in New York.
Completely.
Jason Burgos, Captain Credential, he's killing it right now for the coverage for Sure Dog, and Oscar,
James Lynch, all the homies out there.
James Lynch, and Oscar,
have fun, be safe, especially on Halloween. God, I'm so jealous that they're in New York for this UFC event and on Halloween too.
Yeah,
the bars must be just amazing right now.
And nothing brings like the weirdos of MMA show up for a Diaz fight, so it's got to be.
And it's New York. So it's like triple weirdos. Let's be honest.
Yeah, like this is weirdo on top of weirdo layers that we got here for this fight. So this should be pretty interesting. But my first thought, when this news broke, or it didn't even break like traditional news. I can't remember the gentleman's name who broke it, but he's I know he's got ties to a lot of people in the MMA world. I'm not sure if he's officially tied to a particular publication or outlet or anything, but he said there were some issues with Darren Till's visa, and it wasn't clear whether or not he was going to make it for the fight. I immediately thought to last week when Bellator had a fight drop out literally days, but like I want to say a day or two before the fight because of a visa issue. And my first thought was like, isn't this stuff that's done weeks in advance? Like, I'm not familiar with how this whole process works, but if you were promoting a fight, shouldn't you have all those ducks in a row?
You should.
It just seems like logic to me. If there's going to be
this is a regular story though. I feel like for combat sports, like especially in boxing, like we got like a lot of Eastern Europeans coming to the U.S. Visa issues is a common storyline. I
expect that to happen in boxing. I expect it to happen in some MMA promotions, but UFC. for all the things that and being someone who's worked some of these events with me, I mean, we talk about the difference all the time. We can criticize the UFC for a lot of things. I can have a whole show just trashing the UFC about certain things that they do and business practices and whatnot. The one thing that we can never criticize them on is how they roll when it comes to logistics. When an event is being put together, they put everything in place as it should be, and they work on a very tight schedule. And they do things in a very professional manner in that regard. So this seems like one of those things where it's like damn, like the UFC messing up on this close for a fight this big. I mean, this is the co-main event in the Madison Square Garden card with what could be a title eliminator for the middleweight division.
It shouldn't be, but yeah, it could be.
Yeah, exactly. But it shouldn't be, but you get the idea. This is a big fight. And this is something. It'd be one thing if these were the curtain jerkers on the prelims, and something got lost in the shuffle, but not Darren Till versus Kelvin Gastelum on the pay-per-view co-main event.
Yeah, especially since it was like a day or two after like the whole like Diaz, PD, situation. So it was like, man, this card just get to Saturday, please. please, all these fights get to Saturday, and it seems like we're going to get all these fights on Saturday. Of course, weigh-ins tomorrow. Hopefully nothing goes crazy there. I know Kevin Lee, we're going to get to that in a minute. Let's hope he makes that weight cut, Certain guys I'm worried about here. But digressing, it's back to coming at some Darren Till, X's and O's of the fight. Darren Till, to me, is a guy that I think he has been largely overhyped by the UFC, to be quite honest. I think he is an accurate puncher. I think he is a better come-forward pressure fighter than he is a counterboxer. I think his defense on the back foot is just atrocious. He has no head movement. He can't really parry and block shots because of the way his stance is. So if he gets caught going backwards more than one step, you can just ding him up pretty quickly.
As Masvidal did.
Masvidal quickly realized. And I think that's going to be a blueprint for Kelvin Gastelum to follow quite easily. Because Kelvin Gastelum is a guy that Darren Till needs. He's one of those guys that sort of needs control, to be honest. Like he's one of those guys. He may not value it as much as maybe other fighters, but he likes to be in control. He likes to control the rhythm, the range of the fight. And if those two things are not in his control, his game falls apart. And I talk about this a lot. There are a lot of fighters like this where they need those two things. Mm-hmm. Oh, this pace is uncomfortable for me. I'm out of here. Oh, this guy's too close. This guy's too far away. I can't get to him. Whatever it is.
I can't do exactly what I want to do, how I want to do it. And therefore, something must be wrong.
And then on top of that, because there's one thing for that to happen and for that to be in a fighter's mind, because that will happen at times in a fight for every fighter, for every fight. But the fighters that then that thought happens and then their entire game plan goes out the window, and they lose themselves in the fight, they lose themselves in the round. Those fighters are, I think, some of the hardest to sort of train and to probably get past that point. And Darren Till is one of them. And Kelvin Gastelum is a guy that he doesn't need to be in control. He doesn't need to have the range. Guess what? He's going to find it. He's going to adapt. He's going to keep throwing combinations. He's going to keep throwing feints. He's going to keep moving his head off the center line. He's going to either wrestle you, exchange in the clinch. He's going to find a way. And he is constantly thinking, constantly adapting. Kelvin Gastelum is one of the best fighters in the middleweight division and one of the most underrated fighters technically in the UFC. He should win this fight handily, in my opinion. I think the second he realizes, Darren Till, I just need to keep pressing forward and his game's going to fall apart, he's going to get him out of there within 2 rounds, in my opinion. Like the 7-minute mark, expect this fight to be done with, in my opinion. I think Kelvin Gastelum is going to just start landing combinations. Darren Till's going to be backing up, not being able to get his offensive game going because he's backing up. And because his defense is just non-existent, he's going to eat a bunch of shots. And Kelvin Gastelum can hit. And I think Darren Till is going to get punished in this fight, to be honest. I don't see how he wins this one. Unless Kelvin Gastelum just does not fight a Kelvin Gastelum fight, to be honest.
Yeah, I think if you put the best version of Till versus the best version of Gastelum should win this fight.
Yes.
And I think too, like, this is a good thing for Till to be fighting at middleweight now. I mean, he's a huge guy. To dream of him making 170 is nuts. So I don't know if you've ever seen him in person.
No, I've never been near Darren Till. I mean, Gastelum or Till?
Till. Well, yeah, I mean, we interviewed Gastelum together. Yeah, but Till, I saw him. I met him at I think it was 227. I think he was like a guest fighter, and they brought him back to the media room. And this dude is massive. I mean, I'm talking about this. It makes no sense that he would even think that 170 made any sense for him. And I think although he was taking away a lot from himself making that weight, it benefited him in the sense that he's so big and so imposing at 170 that there's this automatic like hesitation. And there's this automatic respect that you're going to have for his power because you just see how big he is. Gastelum doesn't have that sort of respect for people at all. Like I think even Woodley, who typically approaches guys in a fairly fearless but strategic fashion, he initially seemed hesitant in the opening seconds of their fight. Like he kind of seemed like he played a safer approach until he got a feel of what he was capable of, and then he went into action. Gastelum does not wait for that. Gastelum just is, that's the guy? Okay. And he just goes for it. Also, he's someone who is extraordinarily good at closing distance. Probably, I would say probably the best in UFC at doing it, at closing the gap and getting in the range he wants to get in and putting his fist on you. I think when he moved back up to middleweight, after his run on Tough at middleweight, when he went back up there, I think his first fight was that Nate Marquardt?
I can look it up really fast.
Or Tim Kennedy. It was one of them, but I know Tim Kennedy.
It was Nate Marquardt.
Yeah, and then Tim Kennedy was after that, right?
Oh wait, hold on. No, because he went back down to welterweight after that. Remember? So
okay.
So he
right. Yeah, he went to welterweight after that. Yeah,
he lost Neil Magny at 170, went back up to 185, beat Johnny Hendricks at 185, and then beat Tim Kennedy at 185, and then lost to Chris Weidman.
Okay, that's right. So like in particular the Tim Kennedy fight, where it was like Tim Kennedy is a big guy from middleweight, and Gastelum had zero respect for that. He walked right in front of his face and he hit him as much as he wanted. And Kennedy was essentially helpless through a lot of that fight. I see something very similar happening. I think Till will handle it better than Kennedy. I don't think Till is going to just flail around and just die the way Kennedy did. But I do think it's going to look very similar. Yeah, man. And this is really not the best look for Darren Till to make his middleweight debut. There's a reason why Dana White apparently was not very fond of this matchup. I mean, I asked him at the 241 presser about that, and he was like, he looked at me like I was crazy. And no, that's not happening. I
don't understand this matchup at all. Like, to be honest, it makes no sense.
And even when we talked to Gastelum at the Dominance MMA day or whatever,
which was a
like
great
the
day,
way
by the
Gastelum was talking about this fight coming together was like he was even confused by it. It was kind of like it was off, it was on, it was off, it was on. He just kind of was like, well, I guess it ain't on, so whatever, I'll fight someone else. And then said the offer came. So the hesitance that the UFC or Till's camp or somebody showed about this fight being made was well warranted. This is not the best time. This is not the best way for Till to be introduced to 185, if you ask me.
I agree. Moving on, next fight on the card, Stephen Thompson versus Vicente Luque. A fight that it's one of those where Stephen Thompson is clearly the better fighter here, in my opinion. But Vicente Luque is a offspring of Ares, the god of war, probably, or something, right? Like he is some manifestation of chaos within MMA. So I don't know where to pick here. I want to say Vicente Luque knockout because like crazy shit happens in this fight, and if crazy shit happens, I feel like that's not a good thing for Stephen Thompson. Another guy that needs to control the range, the tempo of a fight. I don't know. I'm hesitant to pick. I'm on the fence here. And let me get your prediction and thoughts on this fight before I make mine.
I actually think Wonder Boy is going to win this one. And I think a lot of that chaos is gonna favor him. First off, Wonder Boy is not really a guy who's afraid of a dogfight.
You're right,
Wonder Boy has this really strange thing about him, which I absolutely love, and I think I really off the top of my head I want to say that Woodley was the only guy to really break this streak, but this happened after they had already fought, and where Wonder Boy will stand in the pocket with you in his full karate stance and have boxer-like head movement. And he makes himself very hard to hit.
Yeah, he's good.
He's a guy who handles someone trying to crowd him and try, because this is, keep in mind, like everyone who fights Wonder Boy wants to do this. Every single person that steps in there against Wonder Boy, probably with the exception of Darren Till, the idea which is
a fight we never need to talk about.
Yeah. Man, I still there's a guy on Twitter who still tries to give me shit about the robbery of the year article that I wrote for Sherdog about that fight, but it's another story. That's like, man, get over it. Come on now. Like, why are we still talking about this? But anyway, like everyone who fights Thompson tries to close the distance. They try to get in close. They try to they try to jam up those kicks. Luque is going to be absolutely no different. That is really the only path to victory for him. But the way he enters is leaving himself wide open to all sorts of hits.
Yeah, it's poor. It's technically very like Brian Barberena was able to out strike him at times and counter strike him at times. And if Brian Barberena, the guy that is famous for beating who was it? Mickey Gall
and Sage Northcutt.
Oh, Sage Northcutt. Sorry, mixed up welterweight prospects there. But like, sorry. I agree. Stephen Thompson should win this one. I'm going to lean Stephen Thompson as well. Yeah. He's technically better, and like you say, he does thrive at times in chaotic situations, even though Woodley demolished him at times.
Yeah,
in those moments.
Yeah, but you're talking with Woodley. You're talking about next level with a lot of the skills. So I look back to the Roy McDonald fight, and Wonder Boy tagged him up real good and made McDonald hesitant. And McDonald didn't have that war god approach that he normally takes, or at least he used to take that iteration of McDonald. Luque, on the other hand, and that's how McDonald survived. He got into that defensive mode, and it was like, okay, I'm just going to make it to the final bell, as opposed to trying to really win this fight outside of his random Imanari rolls. Now with Luque is the type that would get hit, realize, oh man, I got rocked, and double down on his approach and get hit again, and double down on his approach and get hit again. And I think that keeps up until either the judges call it or he goes to sleep.
I'm pretty much in agreement with you. Moving on, Derek Lewis fighting Blagoy Ivanov in a heavyweight fight. I have very little thoughts about this fight. It's probably going to be bad unless it ends in the first round. And even then, I'm sorry, a third round KO does not excuse a really bad fight. Just doesn't. Usually.
I'm actually kind of excited for this one.
Really?
Yeah, because first, Blagoy Ivanov, it seems to be one of the more promising guys, kind of trying to make himself known in the heavyweight division. He's got good boxing. Granted, he doesn't throw a lot of shots, but he's very good technique. Sambo champion, despite the fact that he doesn't really use his sambo very often, which I find puzzling. Like, you don't see him go for too many takedowns. But what I'm most excited about, though, is what we're going to see from Derek Lewis. Now, he claimed that for quite some time, and I forget exactly which fight it was that he supposedly tore his knee up, but he says he's been fighting for well over a year or something with his busted knee. And a knee like that, you can't train on it properly. He's got the back issue and everything. So he's had surgeries to try to correct some of these problems. I want to see what Derek Lewis looks like without the walking in with these ailments. If he, was able to train more, if he was able to do more things in camp, what is he going to look like? And one thing for sure, Ivanov's sort of approach, the approach that he had in the Rothwell fight, the approach that he had in JDS and Tai Tuivasa, where he's kind of getting to these even boxing matches with everybody, that doesn't bode very well against Derek Lewis. Like, you've got to come with something different. And I'm curious as to see what version of Lewis we see, and if Ivanov decides to mix things up to play to the level of devastation that he's going to be facing on Saturday.
I'm not going to add anything to it because I don't like heavyweight fights usually. You know me, Ant.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those skeptics when anyone is coming back from a lot of injuries like Derek Lewis has, if they're all of a sudden healthy and if that even means anything. It's one thing to be healthy and then go back into fight camp and then have a fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but he's been out for a little while now.
He has. No. Again, I'm skeptical. That's all. I'm just skeptical of it. If he comes out there, because he did look pretty, I would say, thin.
Yeah, he looked a lot leaner.
He looked lean from what I've seen from all the fight week stuff. If he comes out here, looks better shape, the old Derek Lewis from what we remember, great to see, right? With obviously the technical improvements he's made throughout his career thus far. This should be a fun little fight, but it's definitely on the sort of the main card, so to speak, the one fight I'm least looking forward to, but that's only because the rest of the fights are rather amazing matchups, in my opinion. Speaking of one of those matchups, Kevin Lee, Gregor Gillespie.
Oh, yes.
And you were like a big fan of this matchup when it was announced. I wasn't. I've slowly and hesitantly become a fan of this matchup as time has worn on, and I've kept going back and watching Gregor Gillespie fights because he's one of those guys you sort of have to keep reminding yourself of, I feel like. He hasn't fought a lot this year. He's only fought once, I think, in February.
Yeah, something like that.
Early in the year, and he's also just had a sort of kind of a short UFC career, kind of a one that's only been around for a couple of years.
Hasn't fought any really notable names.
You know,
either,
again, it's a guy that you have to probably re-educate yourselves on time and time again. He's a guy that's good. He's talented in every department. I like the way he transitions from striking range to clinch to a takedown. Like, it's effortless. It's quite natural. The guy seems to be the goods. He passed the eye test in a lot of ways that even a guy like Kevin Lee, for example, passed some time ago, right? He's definitely on that path of a lightweight prospect that's on the rise. And this is the matchup where if he beats Kevin Lee, a guy that's far bigger than him, a guy that was on sort of the same road that he himself is on now, it would mean a lot. And Kevin Lee, even though he's a guy that has been trying to figure himself out as of late, been trading wins and losses, went up to 170, lost to RDA, went back down to 155 for this fight. Beating him still means something, and him going to Faraz Zahabi and TriStar is something that I am so interested to see. TriStar is, and Faraz Zahabi especially, is one of my favorite gyms and coaches in all of MMA. Like, I truly respect everything that guy says when it comes to the sport. I even watch his podcast from time to time. Great podcast as well. Really insightful stuff. I think if anyone can sort of fix the issues of Kevin Lee's technical game, it is Faraz Zahabi and TriStar, man. If they can make him a GSP light, holy shit, Kevin Lee is going to be something special. And like Oscar Martinez says in the chat, this is a must-win for Kevin Lee. Or he's asking, is this a must-win for Kevin Lee? I think it is. This is a must-win, at least in terms of relevance in this division. If he loses this fight, he's no longer relevant. He has to rebuild himself in a major way. If he wins this fight, he's back in the top 15, back in the top 10 at lightweight. Like, really nothing changed. You know, he goes fights maybe Ally Quinton a rematch, maybe Don Cerrone. You know, there are a lot of matchups out there. Islam Makhachev. You know, there are a lot of guys out there for Kevin Lee to fight after this. If he wins, that would still keep him relevant. But if he loses, it's rebuild time. And with the current state of the UFC and just letting guys go kind of here and there, I wouldn't be surprised if they just, like, parted ways with him at some point. Like, if he just kept losing, like, if he lost this fight, the UFC has done weirder things. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it would be not surprising. It would be definitely on brand for UFC to let a guy go after a couple losses when he's still extremely talented and has a high ceiling. Happens all the time, unfortunately. So I do think in some way this is a must-win. Now, who I think is going to win? I think Kevin Lee should win this fight. I think he's still, technically speaking, the better fighter, though. Gregor Gillespie, in terms of achieving strategic goals, sort of switching back to the Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal conversation, right? Kevin Lee struggles to achieve strategic goals. He really does. Struggles to adapt within fights as well. Gregor Gillespie, from what we've seen, is quite natural with those two things. He has a game plan. He goes in and accomplishes it. He goes in and is quite efficient at accomplishing it as well. But I do think Kevin Lee, on top of being far bigger, I think he has far more experience. I think he's a far better technical fighter. He should win this matchup, in my opinion. Ant, your thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth with this one a lot, and I think on the video for the preview article on SureDog, I think I went with Gregor Gillespie, and I'm still kind of struggling. Like, is that the pick that I want to stick with? So when I look at this, Kevin Lee obviously it's a big deal that he's at TriStar, that he's under the tutelage of Firas Zahabi. And that's important for two reasons. One, that it's Firas Zahabi, perhaps the smartest mind in mixed martial arts from a strategic standpoint, a guy who can craft these incredible game plans and has guided the careers of some very notable fighters who are known for their fight IQ and known for approaching things with a proper strategy. So there's that, but there's also the fact that I believe that Kevin Lee's issues have mainly been due to the fact that he hasn't been able to enjoy coaching the way most people have. There's have a coach, a centralized coach, mold and develop them over the last several years, and that's because of the unfortunate passing of Robert Follis, who was his head coach, and since then he's really been scrambling to find some sort of consistency in his camp. Like the RDA fight, that fight does not happen the way it happens if you have the right person in your corner.
Agreed.
He would. I know Kevin Lee has done some strange things in his most recent losses, and it's like he's either completely selling himself out for a takedown that just isn't there, or he's gassing at these weird points, or he gets in cruise control when he really shouldn't be in cruise control. It always seems to be something outside of his skills and talents as a fighter. As Kevin Lee, low key, I think is one of the most skilled guys in that division overall.
He just
I
doesn't
am
put
concerned
it together
about
in the right way.
Say what now?
I would agree with you. He just doesn't put it together in the right way, or the right combination, the right sequence.
Exactly. It's like he does the right thing at the wrong time. Sort of. It's something is just a little off in what he's doing, and I think coaching will solve a lot of those problems. But you're talking about him being at when the RDA fight was that like May, I think it was. And May to when we're about to hit November. So you're talking about what, like 6 months or something like that. That's not a lot of time with a new coach. It wasn't like he left the gym. I mean, he left the arena after fighting RDA and then went to Firas Zahabi the next day. Like he toured a few different gyms and tried to spend a couple weeks here and there and just see what fit until he got to TriStar. So he hasn't been there long. And typically we don't see a fighter really show the effects of a good training camp, like a new training home, until maybe the second or sometimes the third fight.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, and also too, he has had conditioning problems. He's, and I think that's more so weight related. Him dropping down to 155 again. I don't know if his body can handle it. Maybe he's cleared up some things in his diet or his strength and conditioning regimen that will address that. I certainly hope so. But I'm leaning toward Gregor because of that, because of these unknowns with Kevin Lee. And the thing is, if you come in with a conditioning issue, if you come in without having your mental approach fully together, Gregor Gillespie has the perfect style to break you.
On that sort of note of cardio issues, I think we're both in agreement here that he has cardio issues, but he's been largely in 5-round fights as of late. This is a 3-rounder. Does that change that equation at all, that it's now 10 minutes less of action?
I mean, it should. It really should, but like,
or does the movement back or does the movement back down to 155 sort of offset that completely?
Yeah,
it doesn't
exactly.
matter.
So, like, and even still at 170, man, the RDA fight, he was gassed in the second round.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm not really sure. Like, I'm not really sure what to think of Kevin Lee, and I do know this: Kevin Lee is the better fighter on paper. Mm-hmm. He's the guy who has the stand-up skills. He has, like, Gregor Gillespie has never wrestled, at least in MMA, a guy with the grappling ability of Kevin Lee. He has not. But one thing for sure happens with Gregor Gillespie: he gets a hold of you, and your life is going to be pretty rough for the next 15 minutes. If he is able to do that, if he is able to get a hold of Kevin Lee, or Kevin Lee have one of these, a conditioning breakdown or a mental lapse or something that disconnects what he's capable of and what he does, Gillespie's style is custom made to steamroll people that are in these in-between phases. So I'm very, very, very reluctantly picking Gillespie, and I'd say even more reluctantly than I'm picking Diaz.
Sad, man. sad.
You know, man.
I know, man. That's
I'm a Kevin Lee guy.
You're a Kevin Lee fanboy, man. Like it's sad, man. Like,
I mean,
I get it. Look, I'm picking Masvidal against Diaz, man. I'm picking against Diaz.
I know it hurts you, man.
I'm picking against Diaz twice in a row, man. Like, this does not feel right for me. Like, I need to maybe go see a therapist or something. Like, clearly something's wrong. That I'm not a good enough fanboy that I used to be, man. It's a sad day, man.
We're falling off, man.
We're trash.
Man, for me to pick against a black fighter, man. It hurt my soul. You know that, right?
But I will say this: the stare down between the two I think it was media day. That was hilarious. It was quite comical. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I didn't see it actually.
I won't spoil it. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. It's quite funny.
I just saw his hair. I was like, well, I don't know what Lee doing with the hair though. I can't rock with that.
Man, yeah. Digress from that. Corey Anderson versus Johnny Walker. Oh God, this fight. This is one of those that I love this matchup. Like, it's gonna answer so much, hopefully, about Johnny Walker. And, if Corey Anderson gets past this guy, like, give him his title shot, for God's sake, man.
Really?
Like you have put him up against like everyone in this division, and he has fought literally everyone but the champion. If he beats Johnny Walker, who is probably the hottest prospect in the game right now, like the fastest rising prospect in the game, literally, just from a pure time perspective, he's been in the octagon cage for 3 minutes total,
something like that. Yeah.
And he's now possibly fighting for a #1 contender fight. Honestly, for John Jones, the best fighter of all time. I mean, I don't think anyone's fought 3 minutes in the UFC total and then fought the best fighter of all time after that. Like, that must be like a record if that were to be the
most
case.
efficient 3 minutes of your life.
Insane, right? And if you were to somehow get another crazy win here, God, how do you not give the title shot to Johnny Walker, man? This guy's just insane.
Don't get injured on the celebration
or dance moves.
Yeah,
or both. Just don't.
Do that.
Just do a 2-step, man. You're good. Just do a 2-step. But I'm really perplexed on picking this fight because, again, we've only seen 3 minutes of action from Johnny Walker. I would say his regional run has losses. It has fights where even if you go back and look, you can see clear flaws and issues. But his UFC run, he's been lights out against subpar competition. Huge, giant step up in competition against Corey Anderson, a guy that is not the most exciting lights out fighter, but again, sort of stitching to the narrative of the card, a guy that has a strategic goal and is quite efficient at meeting it. Corey Anderson's pretty good at it. Might not be exciting doing it, but he wants to throw, a bunch of combinations, pressure guy, do a lot of clinch work, go for takedowns a lot. He's going to do all of that. It may not be exciting doing it, but he's going to do it all. And he's going to focus on game plans, focus on achieving it. And he might be the antithesis to the wild, chaotic nature that is the violence incarnate of Johnny Walker, right? It's one of those matchups where it's on paper a toss-up. Both guys are the antithesis of the other. And I could see Johnny Walker just being the athletic freak, throwing a lot of feints, messing with Corey Anderson, then boom, lighting him up and knocking him out. Or I see Corey Anderson just doing his thing and winning a 3-round decision and really just out-pressuring and outworking Johnny Walker. And after that 3-5 minutes of work, Johnny Walker's game is found out, where it's not a lot there. And maybe just a really athletic talent, but his technical game, his clinch game, his ground game is not there. We don't know that yet. And I feel like Corey Anderson is going to be one of those guys that we're going to find out. But just so I'm on the record here, I'm going to pick Johnny Walker still, just so if he does win this fight in spectacular fashion, I can say I picked him. And when he goes and beats John Jones in a minute flat, I can say I picked him then too, all along the train for the Johnny Walker era. Right? I mean, it's here.
I mean, he's got the right last name to make waves in the world. So,
or just the name period. It's a brand of liquor. It's a perfect name.
The last name Walker.
Oh, I mean, that's true. Yeah, fuck.
That's just. I mean, it just exudes greatness. I'm leaning toward Corey Anderson though for this fight.
It's the smart pick. I'm not picking the smart pick here.
I mean, and it makes sense why. I mean, Johnny Walker's been destroying people, and it's been quite dramatic. But let's examine the way.
And I will say this: there have been flashes of technical brilliance within that 30 seconds of action, right? Like his feints, his movements. There's some top level striking there if the rest of his game is there.
And he's incredibly athletic. I mean, his athleticism can mask over a lot of potential flaws that he could have from a technique standpoint if a fight played out long enough for us to see him. But I mean, the last time we saw him fight beyond the second or first round, beyond the first 2 minutes of a fight, was on the Contender Series against Luis Henrique da Silva, and that guy isn't really that good.
Not bad. I wouldn't say not bad though.
I mean, he's a guy washed out of the UFC.
True.
And is not exactly having the most success on the regional circuit right now.
True.
So it kind of speaks to the level of competition. Khalil Roundtree, for his gifts as a fighter, clearly has his flaws and it's kind of been underwhelming aside from the Gokhan Saki fight and the Eric Anders fight.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Ledet, strange enough, Justin Ledet, probably the highlight of his resume.
It's the best name on his resume. It is.
It probably is, and
so
no disrespect to Ledet, but I mean he's still kind of a relatively unknown guy
and a flat earther. So I mean, who gives a shit?
Oh, flat earther. Oh, anyway.
Well, I know one of them is. One of his UFC opponents was a flat earther, and that was like a huge talking point on the broadcast.
I think it was Ledet actually.
Yeah.
Ledet's
the white guy with cornrows, right? Yeah.
Well, no, he's a.
Or is it like long hair,
with like the mullet,
whatever it is?
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
lives in a trailer park.
Misha Serkinov, who definitely was on the wrong side of a losing streak when he fought Johnny Walker. So I don't know what to think of him, but I do know that Corey Anderson, that 7 times out of 10 he beats the better guys. He beats the notable names. And he also has a style that can neutralize a lot of the flashiness. If Corey Anderson get a hold of you gonna have a long night. He can grind you down and it may not, and like you said, it may not be fun to watch. It may not be the most exciting. But I will say this fight is to determine whether Johnny Walker or Dominic Reyes fights John Jones next. That's really what this is about. If Corey Anderson wins, expect Dominic Reyes to get a call. Or Johnny Walker gets the call if he wins. And that's kind of what I'm seeing for this.
Yeah, I'm not mad with that. With either way. I mean, obviously, Dominic Reyes, I think he sort of punched his ticket with Chris Weidman. He can sort of sit out 6 months and wait for whoever. If Johnny Walker wins here and he fights John Jones, he can wait for that one. Or if Corey Anderson wins, and let's be honest, I think the UFC is going to look over Corey Anderson for Dominic Reyes. And Dominic Reyes has earned his shot in a way, even though I think Corey Anderson, just from the time in the division, maybe deserves it a little bit more. But digressing from that, brief thoughts on the undercard here, since we have a lot of other stuff to get to. Shane Burgos, Marwan Americani, that's a fun fight. Brad Tavares on the card, Andre Arlovski on the card, Lyman Good on the card. I always like seeing Lyman Good on the card. Julio Arce on the card as well against Hakim Duwadu. That's gonna be a fun fight.
That's crazy.
And
fight.
that's the fucking opener of the entire night, guys.
This card is amazing. This is, and this may not be a whole lot of names that are necessarily going to make the casual fan just run to and figure out what those 3 little digits on the back of their credit card are. But this is one. If you are a true mixed martial arts fan, there are some spectacular fights on this card. Julio Arce and Hakeem Dawodu, just sign me all the way to hell up. Sign me up. Rosenstruck and Arlovski just sounds like a great time. Caitlin Chukagian and Jennifer Maia is a potential title eliminator. It should not be this low on the card for the stakes of this fight. There's some very, very interesting stuff top to bottom. Like literally every single fight on this card has some consequence, or at the very least is an exciting matchup.
I agree on all parts. Before we get to the Ben Askren card, let's first talk about the Nate Diaz controversy in a way, right? Like the old PD situation. I talked about this a couple times, but I want to talk about it with you, Ant, because I want to get your take on it. Obviously, Nate Diaz had the whole "you're all on steroids, not me" post, and he insinuated that UFC USADA is fixing it, it's a conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. the gist of it, right? Now, let's tackle this a little bit individually. I would also recommend Bylock MMA. Dave Marsden wrote an article. Dave Marsden, really good follow on Twitter. I think his at's like Dave something. I'll shout it out on Twitter, but he's a really good follow.
Hell of a plug you just gave that man.
I am sorry, I forgot. It's a weird name. It's not like at Dave Marsden, or it's not like that. It's at Dave Do space something. But anyways, digressing. Great article on Bylock MMA, and Bylock MMA has been killing it lately with some good journalism. So check out this article. It's a long piece, but it's in depth. And I will say this: it's a really good also. What?
You said it's a long piece.
God, you're so 13 years old. So good. Oh my God. They do a really good job of explaining what an atypical finding versus an adverse analytical finding is. And I think for a lot of fans, that's something that you should know. But digressing, Ant, before we delve into the Josh Groves piece, which I think is a separate topic in a way, thoughts on the Nate Diaz situation and controversy with USADA? Do you think that the right decision was made? Do you think this is a sign of something within the USADA UFC program? Thoughts on specifically the Nate Diaz PD situation, case, whatever it may be?
I think it's a sign of all the above.
Okay.
I think it's a bit of everything. First off, I mean, we don't need to really have the BMF title, this BMF fight to determine who is the baddest motherfucker in the UFC. The man who forced Dana White and USADA and the UFC to all publicly apologize and exonerate him within a matter of hours is the BMF.
Bar.
Like, he is the baddest motherfucker to ever step foot in the octagon when you're handling things like that. And I don't think it's anyone close when it comes to what Nate Diaz has been able to do from a regulation standpoint to fighter independence and all sorts of things that he has championed, whether he felt like it or not, just by him standing up for himself. I do think this is such a layered issue to me, because first off, I wanted to take Nate Diaz at his word, because he's not really one to just make up things. At the very least, he believes what he's saying. So he's not the one to just outright lie necessarily. So if he's being told, if he's saying that the UFC or USADA or someone of power is telling him to keep quiet, and he refused to, somebody got some explaining to do. Somebody got some real explaining to do, because I know I shared this on Unleashed this week. It was just like, man, if you think back to some of the controversies from a drug testing standpoint in the UFC, you think first thing that came to mind was Mark Hunt versus Brock Lesnar at UFC 200, and how Lesnar tested for, I forget whatever substances it was, and then, but this came out after the fight. So the fight took place, they made all the money, and then the adverse findings come out. I think that's what they were trying to do this time. And Nate just wasn't having it. He just said, no, that's not it. It's his reputation on the line, and also the potential of this being used against him in contract negotiations that he brought up later on. Like, this is next level thinking right here. This is really the long game that he played. And he played it successfully. USADA and the UFC have some questions to answer. They have to answer for the lack of transparency. They have to answer for the notion that they told someone to keep something quiet, days before this mega event of theirs. So there are some questions, and then also too that the threshold for this substance, SARMs, I think it's called.
Yes, SARMs.
Were changed.
And a SARM could be a lot of different substances. Like Askren is a SARM, for those that maybe don't know what specific, like Askren's been something that a lot of people have popped for in the last few years. That's a SARM, for example. And I'm going to talk about that in a separate topic in a second, because there's a whole overarching thing with USADA and WADA that I want to get to with you as well. But yeah, back to what you're saying. Sorry.
Oh yeah. So Yeah. So it's questions that need to be answered, man. It's yeah, and also where is this level of expedience? Where's this level of standing behind your guys and saying, hey, this guy is innocent? Where was this for Josh Barnett? Where was this for Frank Mir? Where was this for Tom Lawler? I guess they kind of sort of maybe did this with Neil Magny. Like, where's this for the guys that aren't headlining these huge pay-per-views? Where is that? Because they should be standing behind their guys. I don't know. I'm gonna try not to get too meta with this because this opens up a whole nother Brave lane for me.
Brave lane. That was a Kanye West moment right there. Dragon energy.
Yeah, BDE. But anyway, man, I'm really just kind of floored by how this whole thing is played out. And really too, I think this could be a potential death blow for USADA's presence in the UFC, or at least the way this deal currently stands. I've never seen the overall fandom of mixed martial arts turn on USADA the way they did in the immediate aftermath of that Nate Diaz tweet. How many people who normally
that Nate Diaz army is unreal though.
It wasn't
just that. No, I know.
Everyone turned into the Nate Diaz army when this fight was in jeopardy.
They did. That's so true. I'll say this. I think the right decision was made, but the process to get to that decision was wrong in every step that was possibly made. And you've laid it out, I think, perfectly. Like, I don't even need to go over what you went. I think you literally step by step explained it perfectly why this specific situation was a clusterfuck and why the inconsistency, because I want to bring up that especially between cases, is a massive issue with the USADA UFC program. And I think that's a good way to sort of jump into it. That USADA UFC program just put out sort of a lot of their data, a lot of their information via Josh Gross of The Athletic. Luckily, I'm a subscriber of it. Anthony is not. Trash. Go support journalism, Anthony.
No, and I got love for Josh, man. Josh Gross is OG. Home. He's a great guy. Great guy. Kind of a de facto mentor for us as far as us looking up to his work before we got involved in media. So
he doesn't know that for sure. That he's a mentor to us, but he is. He's a mentor to a lot of MMA media people.
He's an OG. Like, you got to respect Josh Gross.
Absolutely. He come out and said that USADA has conducted roughly 13,000 tests under the UFC anti-doping program. Around 100 fighters have tested positive. Half related to tainted supplements, according to Jeff Nowitzki. So I want to put that in a pure percentage here. 0.7%. Not 7%, not 17%, not 1%. 0.7% of all USADA UFC tests have resulted in a positive test. Less than 1%. And then half of that is due to tainted supplements per USADA themselves. And the article itself is a long-form article. Definitely recommend it. And does a really good job of actually juxtaposing the Neil Magny case, for example, the one that you brought up, and this case, and how even Neil Magny got completely screwed over in respect to the ruling that we now see that should be precedent with Nate Diaz here, right? Similar to John Jones and pulsing now being a precedent that USADA and Jeff Nowitzki have now set for themselves. The Nate Diaz case is now a precedent that they themselves have set, and that they themselves have to keep to, because they said it, not anyone else. But Jeff Nowitzki has come out and actually set maybe another standard and paradigm shift in PD regulation. And to the very end of this article, again, scroll down here, it's the last two paragraphs. Okay, but it's highly important. Luke Thomas, shout out to Luke Thomas, another one of those OGs, de facto mentors to a lot of us. I did a great video on this as well. I'm going to do my best to delve into it and my thoughts on it. But this is what it has to say. For many years, the onus of, quote, strict liability fell on the fighters, meaning they were the ones responsible for what was in their bodies. Now, Nowitzki and the UFC are arguing that in some cases, the burden must shift from the athlete to the testing authority. Quote now from Jeff Nowitzki. Maybe 10 or 15 years ago when the labs could only detect at the nanogram level, and you didn't see as much contaminants in the world, that policy was appropriate. In this day and age, with those two things happening, the low limits of detection and increased contaminants in our world, I don't think strict liability is the appropriate answer. And guys, I really want to emphasize how significant of a statement this is. Now, Jeff Nowitzki is not a spokesperson for USADA. He is a spokesperson for the USADA UFC program. I want to make that very clear here. So this is not official USADA policy. This is not an official shift of WADA policy, even though WADA is voting on policy shifts in, I think, the next few months. And one of them being levels on SARMs, because there is right now no threshold that allows a certain level of SARMs in your system. They're voting on that coming up via WADA. And since USADA is a WADA-accredited agency, whatever WADA votes on, USADA will probably follow suit or risk not being a WADA-accredited agency, which would risk their IOC usage. But digressing from that, the idea of strict liability is that no matter what is in your system, you are liable for it. Point blank, end of story. Okay? And this would routinely fall this would be the base level sentence for guys that maybe we get the 6-month suspension, the 3-month suspension, the base level suspensions, right? Because look, it's strict liability. We have to give you something here, right? And for a lot of those contaminated supplements, they were under this strict liability paradigm, so therefore they had to receive something, a la Neil Magny. Neil Magny still received a 6-month suspension. Okay? Nate Diaz is not receiving any suspension. He is allowed to fight, and that decision was made within 24 hours. Okay? Obviously, the paradigm and the window is shifting. And the idea that strict liability, the bedrock of PD regulation, okay, when WADA was initiated and formed in 1999, that was the founding principle. It's literally in the second paragraph. Like, you have the first paragraph, which just states what WADA is, and the second one, it's the first sentence emphasizes strict liability. And that is a foundational aspect and principle of PD regulation worldwide. And if that is no longer the paradigm, then what's the point of this? What's the point of the current form of PD regulation? Because the current form of PD regulation is under strict liability and under that bedrock. And if you have a guy of Jeff Nowitzki's clout coming out there and saying, look, in your drinking water, we're finding SARMs. We're finding Askren in drinking water now. Like, at some point, like, what are we supposed to do here? Like, it's not even at, like, your, like, GNC muscle building supplements. Yeah. You're finding it in every store of supplements now. You're finding contamination. How do we fix this now? How do we police this now? And it's a impoliceable situation. And with the current giant net over the ocean trying to collect as much fish as possible, as much PD users as possible, this giant net that's being used, it's a giant waste of time. A la the USADA UFC program and even the USADA boxing usage that was more prominent back in the day. I remember Brian Campbell, I think, pointed out this statistic. 1,500 tests were conducted by USADA between the years of, I want to say, 2008 to 2015, I want to say.
It was like one person caught?
One person was caught. One person. Yeah. So, obviously, this is at least in its current form, it's a joke. It's a giant waste of time.
It's a complete joke. I mean, I will say that I do like the fact that the science is evolving, or policy is evolving around the science. Mm-hmm. I do like that. Like, as you said before, the way they've gone about this has been piss poor backwards. Mm-hmm. And I think we had a very good example of this. Another time you and I were together at an event, UFC 232 was the perfect example of something that the science supports certain things happening, but the way it was done, good Lord, you're talking about horribly mismanaged. I don't know what the solution is, but I do know that this is not working. This is clearly not working. I mean, I don't think any one of us is naive enough to believe that everyone who didn't fall into the 0.7% of tests that actually found genuine cheaters. Like, oh, everyone else is clean and honest. I don't think that's
is this now proof, because look, 13,000 is a huge sample size. Is it now proof that only 0.7% or 1% of the sport uses PEDs?
Yeah, that's laughable. That's totally laughable. It's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. And then also too, if USADA is kind of manipulated by the UFC to do certain things and make sure certain matchups happen, what's the point? What is the point? If you're gonna have a Brock Lesnar test and you're just gonna let him fight and then it comes out later.
Where's the thing that I think that people still fail to frame the conversation is that the USADA program is a particular situation. Okay, it's like, I think people think that like Jeff Nowitzki is a USADA employee.
He's a UFC employee who used to work for USADA.
And USADA does not make decisions. They're a collection agency, so they often don't make decisions. Okay, for example, like WADA, USADA, VADA, these organizations often do not make the call on suspensions. They don't. It's who licenses these fighters, who promotes these fighters. These are often the agencies that will suspend a fighter, or for boxing, the sanctioning body would be another institution that could, right? They have jurisdiction, so to speak, because they sanction the fight. But USADA is not out there, I think, making calls. They're not. It's Jeff Nowitzki and the USADA UFC program. And what that means is that it's UFC employees controlling the outflow of cash to USADA to fund testing. And then USADA is the one that, once they have the funds, they can determine where it goes to, who they test, how much it goes to. But then if someone pops, they send it back to the USADA UFC program, and they make the call on what happens with that test because they have jurisdiction. It's not USADA per se. I think that's where people fail to understand this how the system works. Like VADA, USADA, WADA, whatever, UCAD for UK Anti-Doping Agency, they aren't the ones making the determinations most of the time. It's the bodies that license the fighters, that sanction the fighters. Those are the bodies that will often make the determinations. And in the UFC's case, it's the UFC USADA program. So it's Jeff Nowitzki and anyone else that works with him within that program. And like you said, they aren't USADA employees, they're UFC employees. And I want to make that determination clear here. Because if you're just a collection agency and this is how the contract is set up and you just are supposed to deliver the test and they're the ones that make the determination, I mean, what do you do here? I forget the president of USADA. I forget his name. Excuse me. But do you excuse me? Do you just wow? Do you just I'm good. Would you terminate this contract? Because it hurts your reputation, even though it's not your call in some aspect with what is happening with these positive tests. You get what I'm saying here?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. The thing is, I know I give all the credit to Pat Auger, Body Lock and Sherdog for his insight on this, and this is something he brought up on Unleashed this week. When I'm saying that, this could be the death blow of USADA. The USADA UFC partnership.
I know what you mean by that. I know what you mean by yes.
Yeah, but at least as we know it to be now, he's like, well, USADA ain't going nowhere because this is a layer of legal protection for the UFC. If someone dies in the cage, and I should rephrase that, when someone dies in the cage, when there is a death in the UFC can say, hey, well, we tried. If that and the person who was at the hand was the cause of that death, they say if that person's loaded up on juice, they say, hey, we tried. We did everything we could, and we throw X amount of dollars per year on this program, and everyone's randomly tested, and they got to they got to tell where they are in this little app, and we got this whole program laid out, and this guy cheated, therefore he's responsible. That's what this represents, and this also a prestige thing. Okay, we are the most drug tested sport in the world. Probably even outside the Olympics. So USADA's not going anywhere. Pat was definitely right on that
No, he
assessment,
is.
or at least
Yeah,
a comprehensive drug testing program is not going anywhere. But if we are to take this seriously, if we are to believe this has any merit, I mean, they have to at least fake transparency.
I will say this though, USADA does do fake transparency. Like I know, like, hey, UFC guys and fans, like I know you guys sometimes live in like a bubble here where you think like the sky is falling all the time, but USADA and how transparent they are comparative to, let's say, VADA or UCAD is completely different. Like, I can go to USADA's webpage and see how many times people have been tested. I can go to, John Jones' name and see how many times he's been tested this month, this year. I can't do that for UCAD. I can't do that for VADA.
It's just on the honor system. Take our word for it. We did it.
Yeah. Honestly, they say like this person's within the system, but that's it. That's what they say. Like if I go to VADA's page right now and I implore anyone to try this, do it and look at, I forget, like I think it's a fighters tab, I think it's what it would be called, right? And you can see all the fighters that are currently in the program. And you may get like a vague timetable for when they're in the program, but you won't get any testing numbers, you won't get anything like that. So, yes, USADA, and I want to emphasize the USADA UFC program specifically lacks transparency. But USADA, comparative to other collection agencies, to isolate that just to collection agencies, they're actually far more transparent than others, to be honest, which is surprising. But it's not saying much. They're just more transparent than the others. It's not saying that they are transparent, just more so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always amazed at how much, being involved in mixed martial arts media, like all these weird things you have to start learning about in order to just keep up with the current news.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot about steroids, but I still have no idea what I'm talking about on a lot of this stuff because it is that complex and the science is evolving. So I am, like I said, I'm happy to see there's some evolution in how this is being done. Because we have, like, with contaminants just in general, like, you say like a $20 bill has trace amounts of cocaine on it.
Oh yeah.
And drinking like tap water has trace amounts of painkillers and whatnot, that things that get thrown in the ocean all the time and stuff like that, especially out here, especially in Southern California, that we get contaminants in things because of people being reckless with the environment and whatnot. So it does make sense to think that,
Absolutely.
yeah, a totally unregulated and ridiculously archaic supplement industry is responsible for putting a lot of contaminants back out in the world.
And it's not even just that. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Like, these substances are found all over the place in everyday use at times as well. Even though it's on a ban list for fighting in sports, doesn't mean a lot of these things are banned for usage, period. So you find it end up in household items and stuff, and people throw it down the drain, as you said, right? And it ends up in the water system. And that happens for decades and decades and decades, and then you have a contaminated water system and water supply. You have contaminated food. You have contaminated, and again, supplement system, which is just a completely unregulated industry, as you said. It's just a huge issue that, again, the current form of PD regulation is just not capable of dealing with. And actually, most of the time seems to mischaracterize what they're finding because of this new world, this new contaminated world in a sense. But moving on, just for the sake of time, because we've been here for a while, and I know you probably have to go home to your wife, and she's probably going to be very upset at you for doing a 2-hour show.
Yeah, I definitely been getting text messages, so... You're
going to hurry this up. We're not going to go in depth on the Singapore card, that's for sure. But Ben Askren, quick question. Is he overrated? Has the, air quote, trade for Demetrius Johnson been a complete failure? And
no, I don't think it's been a complete failure. I think, if any, the only person who hasn't enjoyed this trade has been Askren. And in the meantime, he's... No, you've enjoyed it.
I haven't.
You've enjoyed it. You enjoyed the Robbie Lawler fight, didn't you? That was a damn good time, wasn't it? You enjoyed Masvidal kneeing his head into the rafters, didn't you?
Do you know what I would enjoy more? Is Demetrius Johnson still at flyweight and fighting Henry Cejudo for a trilogy fight.
Then, of course, that would have been fantastic.
That's what I would like more.
But you enjoyed watching the Askren Maia fight, didn't you? It was a good fight.
I did not. I did not enjoy watching that. No.
I mean, the striking was god awful, but the grappling exchanges were fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
But man, the striking exchanges.
Oh, those spinning back fists. Oh.
Ben Askren is probably the most unathletic person that's ever been an athlete and achieved the levels of like accomplishments that he has done, right? Like I forget the award he won in collegiate wrestling, but it's one of like the highest awards you can win. Like this guy has achieved things in his life. A UFC belt's not going to be one of them, obviously, but God, he is not an athlete, and that is quite obvious here. Damian Maia was the exponentially better athlete than Ben Askren, and that is terrifying. But you didn't answer this question. Is Ben Askren overrated?
No, I don't think he's overrated. Because I think the curiosity around him coming into the UFC was what was he going to be able to accomplish? It was a question mark. It wasn't a definitive statement. There weren't a whole lot of people that were out there saying, "Oh, when Ben Askren gets to the UFC, oh, he's going to steamroll everybody." There weren't too many people, at least too many people who are reputable saying that. And then also too, let's factor in that Ben Askren, Ben Askren could have benefited from being in the UFC sooner. It would have forced him to develop better. Like when he got the one championship, man, it was paint by numbers. He was on cruise control the whole time. He didn't have to evolve because there wasn't any real challenges for him there. I think also too, we should keep in mind that when he came over to the UFC, this was a guy who was already enjoying retirement. The reason why one was letting him sign over to the UFC is because he said he wasn't fighting anymore. He was on the shelf. So a guy who was comfortable in his retirement and operating his other businesses and helping coach and everything, and you call him off the couch and you say, "Hey, here's a fat check. Go talk some trash and take some people down." Okay, sign me up. And we see the results. I think if we had this, say if Ben Askren came over to the UFC after vacating the Bellator belt as we initially thought was going to happen, or even if he went over he took Dana's suggestion to go over to World Series of Fighting, and then he came over to the UFC, we might be having a different conversation because it would have forced him. We might have, because it would have forced him to evolve some. It would have kicked things up.
But gun to your head, yes or no? Would it have though? Like, do you honestly think like if Ben Askren, let's say not even World Series Fighting, came when he left Bellator, when he was like honestly in his prime in a sense, right? Like had just beat what was it? Was it Douglas Lima and Jay Haran by like dominating fashion, right? Like it. I'm trying to remember his Bellator run now.
Or was it Heron? I'm gonna look it up right now. His last Bellator fight.
But anyways, I mean he looked good, but I mean obviously there was people back then far more than what it was when he did eventually go to the UFC that were saying this is the best welterweight on the planet. Do you think that if he did go to the UFC that this run would not have looked this way? That he would have actually picked up far more wins? Been a legit title contender, even maybe win a belt. Like, do you think that would have happened actually if he went to the UFC 5 years ago?
I don't know. I mean, I look at what happened with Jake Shields. Jake Shields is a guy with kind of similar. Like Jake Shields had championships in every other promotion that he fought in, and a very similar style. A guy who certainly was not being called by K1 to make an appearance at any point, but he was able to get the job done repeatedly against some top names. And you look at what Ben Askren's resume, at least from Bellator, and those names age pretty damn well. Douglas Lima and Koreshkov, Lyman Good, even like there's some names in there. Was like, okay, that's pretty legit. I do think like if Ben Askren came over and had a fight like Jake Shields had against Martin Kampmann, to kind of bridge the gap with a guy who's favorable enough style matchup. Say you put in Ben Askren against a Carlos Condit. We might be talking a different story about Ben Askren. He may not have. It would have been enough to get him a win over someone like Condit at that time. Might have been enough to get him a title shot. The results of that title shot are what they are, and we say, hey, we saw it.
It's also,
but he was able to come to the UFC and do something.
Also, I feel like now that we're talking about 2013 welterweight division, damn, it seems like a completely different division.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems
I was trying to think of names to,
and it was one like Johnny Hendricks was probably a champion around that time, or like Robbie Lawler.
Him and Johnny Hendricks had like a legitimate feud with one another.
Yeah, back
like
in wrestling days. Yeah,
they really dislike each other. That would have been something.
It makes me think that, man, this welterweight division we have now, while definitely, I would say less quality in terms of name value, right, than the Carlos Condit, the Jake Shields, the Robbie Lawlers, the George St. Pierre, like that era was stacked in terms of just names. This welterweight division is stacked in terms of just talent and skill.
Oh yeah, just
like Leon Edwards is a more complete fighter than a lot of the guys circa 2013.
Yeah, or as Santiago Ponzinibbio, who nobody ever talks about.
Like you put Ponzinibbio in 2013 and he would run through 170. He would beat Carlos Condit, beat Robbie Lawler, beat Jake Shields, beat Johnny Hendricks. He's gonna beat all those guys probably
until you get to GSP. But like or Woodley or something. That's when you kind of
even Woodley back then wasn't firing. Like Woodley was getting out kickboxed by Jake Shields around that time.
He wasn't getting out kickboxed. Jake Shields like grappled him against the fence that whole fight.
No, you need to go back and watch the fight. That was he won that fight via leg kicks.
Those garbage. Okay,
I'm not saying they did any damage, but
he did. Most of it was against.
He threw 200 leg kicks in a 3-rounder fight. Like I don't know if that number is true. I'm just saying.
I'm pretty sure that isn't true.
Like if you throw 300 leg kicks,
I get your point.
Yeah, when you throw 1,000 leg kicks, you're gonna win a fight, guaranteed. But anyways, digressing. We have to move on just for the sake of time. The UFC boss, aka Dana White, coming out here and saying that the promotion's targeting a January 18th date for Las Vegas for Conor McGregor. And how foul is it that the UFC is in the beginnings of promoting the next Conor McGregor fight when he was just alleged in another rape allegation?
Yeah, you talk about poor timing, and I think other business needs to be handled first.
A lot of other business
before we're talking about Conor McGregor stepping foot in the cage again, and or at the very least, I would like for it to be addressed. At the very least, if we want to go with the innocent until proven guilty, I get that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with saying, hey, until the legal system decides what's going on, we're not going to stop this man from making a living. Okay, I'll reluctantly be on board with that, but to just pretend like it's not happening, sorry, you've got to at least say it. I mean, you look at the way they framed Greg Hardy and this whole like, oh, he's been through a lot. When you have that sort of approach to someone's struggles, I'm sorry, like you're not generating sympathy. You're not actually tackling the issue.
But at least Greg Hardy like answers questions by it all the time. You know what I mean? Like at least like there's somewhat of an addressment to it. And that's crazy.
That it happened.
Yeah, he acknowledges that this thing exists in the world. Does he like say that he's like sorry and like, no, of course not. But that's a different topic. Conor McGregor literally has not mentioned this, has not been asked about this. Dana White, from my understanding, from my knowledge, has not been asked about this during fight week as of this point. Obviously, he's going to come out on his own and make a statement about it. So, media that's there, please, come on. Please step up here. Like, it's not that hard. Friends that we just shouted out. Oscar Willis, Jason Burgos, James Lynch, Submission Radio. Ask a real question here. Please, don't take 6 months like last time. Please, for the love of God. Okay? Because I guarantee you there's going to be questions about Conor McGregor fighting the winner of this fight on UFC 244, right? I guarantee you there's going to be a question, well, hey, Nate or Jorge, you just won this fight. You're going to fight Conor McGregor next? And if they ask that without asking about this, then there's issues. And, I'm going to have to call out some friends. But, hey, it's what it is. But I will say this. The point of just not addressing it, period, full stop, makes you guys seem more shady, more guilty, naturally. And this is like PR tactics 101. Like, why hasn't Conor McGregor come out with a statement?
Well, his publicist did. It was a pretty weak statement. I mean, there was.
Oh, did he? I didn't see it.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Was his agent or his publicist?
His publicist.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a publicist statement. But there was also at the press conference he held in Moscow, I think it was. Someone tried to ask him about it, and the translators or moderators, whatever,
that's right,
refused to let it fly.
That's right. But that's not surprising. It's Russia.
Yeah. Oh, and then also the rest of the so-called media there was all trying to line up to take selfies with McGregor afterwards. So yeah, they all.
I'm pretty sure they got the one championship PR team to like get the media there for that Conor McGregor press conference. Just saying.
Yeah.
But digressing from that, I think we're both in agreement here. Like, this is just like, at least address it, for God's sake.
Yeah, at least has to be addressed now. I mean, let's before we shut down this topic. Who is your preferred opponent?
Don Cerrone. I've been pretty consistent. I still think Don Cerrone is the best matchup. It's still a fun fight, and it's closer to a tune-up, which Conor McGregor honestly needs. To sort of, compartmentalize the rape case and what Conor McGregor needs in terms of just a fighting career. He needs a tune-up, and Don Cerrone is closer to a tune-up than Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje would destroy Conor McGregor right now. That's such a bad style matchup for Conor. Don't do that.
Even if you win, even if you beat Justin Gaethje, you're not going to be the same afterward. It's just
we're not going to see for another 2 years.
This version of Conor McGregor doesn't need to be in there with Justin Gaethje.
Not at all. Speaking though of Conor McGregor, former opponent Khabib Nurmagomedov, and obviously lightweight champion, is confirmed by Dana White, is set to fight Tony Ferguson early 2020. No date, no confirmed specific date or location yet, but it says that clash is confirmed. Blah blah blah. It's Dana White speak. Do we think this fight is official in some aspect, and they're just waiting to get all the promo packages in order and dot the I's, cross the T's, or is there something still holding this fight up?
I think McGregor's holding this fight up.
Ooh, that's what you think it is.
That's what I think it is. I think that's what I believe, because depending on when they announce a date, if they announce a date to say like February, something like that, okay, well, both fights can take place simultaneously, and that's fine. Say Khabib wants to wait until March to fight, which would make a lot of sense because he just fought in September, and he normally, I think lately he's been fighting once or twice a year. So all right, that would be an acceptable time frame. If that's the case, if he wants to wait till March to fight, and I know March is always a big Vegas pay-per-view, do you think the UFC is not thinking about, McGregor gets through this fight in January, he can make that. He gets through that fight. He smokes Cerrone, he knocks him out in the first minute. Man, that sounds like a number one contender fight if Khabib is going to fight in March. So I think they're just waiting to see what's going to happen. That I think the table is being set to screw Tony Ferguson again. And then like that one matchup that you're always talking about, that I'm always shooting down, GSP. Because they've been talking about that a lot lately too. At least GSP and Khabib have.
That's where my head went. That GSP is still an option out there.
Yeah, and GSP being an option too. So I think there's just a wait and see approach. Like, that's how many times has Tony Ferguson been the guy, And he's on this historic win streak. You stripped away his belt because he tripped over a cord in your studio promoting your fight.
But he was wearing sunglasses inside, so you get no sympathy from me.
Well, okay.
I mean, come on.
But he always wears sunglasses inside.
And again, you get no sympathy from me.
So his eyes are already adjusted. It's okay. So it's all good, man. He saw the cord, or he could have seen the cord. It just wasn't. The cord wasn't taped to the floor. That's the problem.
Was it? Was it not taped to the floor? Is that for sure?
I'm just assuming because I'm just assuming. I'm just assuming
you think with his cat-like. You think with his cat-like reflexes, when he would trip, he would just instantly roll into an Imanari roll. like instantaneous, right? But no.
Yeah, it was like one of the phases of his workout to like fall and then turn into some cat stance or something.
I'm pretty sure that was an IG like Instagram story at some point, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So,
but digress from that. Let's get to the last topic of the day, then get out of here. Dana White letting us know, thank you, Dana, that Paulo Borchina Costa is injured. Air quotes. I know Anthony has another theory about this, and they're working on the next Israel Adesanya fight. And before I get to Anthony's conspiracy theory about it, let's go to Yoel Romero on Instagram, looking like he gained 40, 50 pounds after his last fight with Costa. And Israel Adesanya also, a lot of social media posts talking about Romero. Hashtag I see you, boy. Text messages, conversations with his coach saying, like, yes, let's take on Romero. Feed him to us. I love that quote. And then Romero comes out here. Look at that face, man. He's already pissed off.
Hey, Israel. Why you say I see you, boy? Why you say I see you soon, boy? No. You don't need to say something like this. Give me the fucking day. Give me the fucking day. Tell him that I done a wine the fucking day. All right? That's it.
That is so terrifying.
that is really frightening.
And he looks massive. Oh my God. I don't know if you've seen the video if you're watching on YouTube, Ant, but holy shit. This guy looks like he's a heavyweight. I don't know how he makes 185, man. Like, obviously, like we saw him during a weight cut, and like he looked bad during that weight cut.
Yeah, he looked pretty rough.
I don't know how he does it, man, and still has the energy for that type of fight that he put on afterwards. But Ant, your thoughts on Adesanya's opponent falling out? Obviously, Borchina was supposed to be the next title contender. We have Jared Cannonier, Yoel Romero out there, but I know you have a specific theory about why Costa's out.
We were just talking about the lack of transparency with USADA and the UFC. Paulo Costa, if you were to, and I don't want to throw any accusations out there because
but it has happened before.
Journalistic integrity and whatnot. But if you were to construct a steroid user in the laboratory, he probably would look like Paulo Costa. Just saying, like the guy is built like someone who molded into an action figure or something. Like,
and let's not forget that he literally was like in this situation not too long ago before the Romero fight where they hit
a strange situation. Like, to fight where he had like a suspension in New York, but he was fighting in California, and it canceled out a fight in Florida. So it was a pretty strange situation over some sort of medication, apparently. So without me knowing the details behind it, but I have so little trust and faith in USADA at this point, especially after this Diaz thing. I don't know. And then on top of that, he was on Instagram like a couple of hours before any news of this broke, and he was doing mitt work. So go figure. Like, that doesn't sound like someone who just tore a bicep, unless that bicep tear happened right after they hit record or took the picture and posted it. Like,
maybe it was old footage. Maybe it was just old footage.
Maybe he went through. He scrolled through Throwback Thursday.
You know how Instagram thoughts be. They have like the storage of photos and shit.
For when they went that one vacation they went on 3 years ago, and you still see pictures of it for the next 5. Yeah.
God bless them.
Yeah. So, but man, as far as Yoel Romero being his opponent, being the opponent for Israel Adesanya, while I do love that fight, I do love the idea of that fight. Man, I hate the idea of a guy who is lost 3 out of his last 4 getting slotted in for a title shot when there's a Jared Cannonier out there undefeated at middleweight and smashing people
and just beat a top 5 middleweight.
Exactly. So And
on top of it, I will add this: like some of these stylistic, intriguing aspects to a Romero Adesanya fight are present in a Cannonier fight. I would say, right? And I would like Cannonier. I mean, if you're going to talk about explosive athletes, he is right behind Romero in the division. Insane power, right behind Romero in the division. I would even maybe argue that Cannonier maybe is a slightly better striker now.
I would say so. I mean,
Romero.
he's definitely the more consistent the more consistent fighter.
Absolutely.
I would say, like, he's a guy who, for the duration of the fight, he is going to be fighting. Like Yoel will take these strange, gaps in activity and whatnot. It doesn't, to me, it says Yoel Romero's a sexier name. That's what it is. Yoel Romero's the guy that has at least some attention from the casual fan base. He's like a strange dude. He's a scary looking guy, and you throw him in there against Adesanya, and he'll trash talk, and he'll play the media game too. So that's what this is about to me. That's what this looks like. If Paulo Costa is unavailable for whatever reason to challenge Israel Adesanya, Jared Cannonier should be getting a phone call right now, and that's it.
I agree. Jared Cannonier's on a tear through this division, it seems. Romero's 1-4. Sorry. These things do matter. Even though the fight would be great, Adesanya Romero's a great fight.
I love the fight, but I want to see the guy who really earned the shot as of right now. And then also too, this would take the UFC would have to actually try to market something in a more creative way. Yoel Romero is a guy that you can easily throw in a poster and oh man, that's going to be great. I got to see that. But Cannonier is, might take some actual work to try to promote him. So promote him.
Let's go out to callers, 323-870-4051. Press 1 to get in the queue. International callers, Skype, Mixed Combat Radio, 503, area code 503. Who is this? Where are you calling from? 503. 503. Going once. Going twice. You're out of here. Sorry. Well, Aunt, that'll be it. I do apologize. I was sort of trying to wait because we were supposed to have a call on from a good old friend of the show, the St. Peter of Sherdog himself, Cole Shelton. But
Judas.
I think he forgot the showtime shifted today, unfortunately, or he's just busy. He's a young guy, it's Halloween.
He betrayed you.
It would be on brand for what you would call the Judas of Sherdog.
You're just going to Judas. What can you say?
Again, St. Peter, I think is probably the better.
He
phrase.
betrayed you for 30 pieces of silver. Remember that.
Oh, guys, that's going to be it for today. I hope everyone has a great evening, great night, wherever you are. Enjoy the fights on Saturday. We're definitely going to give you a lot of content on Saturday. Ant's going to be in studio, so whatever we decide to do, even 4-hour show and we cover everything, I don't know. But we're going to do something. We're going to do some content. So keep an eye out
I'll be there. So
true, beer, weed will be on hand. all the festivities.
Oh, wow. I don't do any of that stuff.
Anyways, find me, Matt Hunter, MCR, all platforms. Ant, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at AntWalkerMMA. Also my Instagram, yet I never post anything. Follow me anyway.
Yes, and follow his work also at Sherdog.com and MMA On Point as
and
well.
And the Walkout Network.
And the Walkout Network. I apologize. Gotta keep that independence alive, man, of course.
Gotta own your content.
Own your content.
At least some of it.
At least some of it. That's true. That's true. You guys have a great one. Hit the like button, share the show, all that fun stuff on the way out. Peace.
Everybody's on steroids. The whole UFC, everybody.
You know, they're selling you all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up. I mean, maybe that's your job, but where I come from, you know, people like that get slapped.